that intellectuals, even if what they do is useful, they don't do it because it's useful. They do it because it's fun, because they enjoy it, because they have great pleasure in doing it. And so Rousseau wants you to start seeing intellectual activity not like a public service, but as a private indulgence. So when my friends want to go to grad school, it's mostly because they want to read books. It's not because they want to save the world. I'm doing this lecture series for great reason, because I just gained great pleasure from reading these books very carefully. I mean, my friends who had the misfortune of being my roommates observed that I make the exact same noises when I read something interesting as when I eat something tasty. I go, And that, I think, is what Rousseau wants you to see intellectuals as closer to the glutton than Mother Teresa. And in the same way, a society does not elevate the gluttonous life. Rousseau is wary about elevating the intellectual life, because that would be elevating and justifying a life of idleness, a life of satisfying private pleasures and not contributing to the community. Okay. So those are his critiques of science, reason, and philosophy. Contrarianism, rational inquiry destroying the social fabric, and idleness. Now let me be clear here so we don't go overboard. Reason is going to be necessary for the cultivation of virtue. Okay, so the Spartan citizen is going to have to reason. That doesn't mean subject everything to rational inquiry. That also doesn't mean that kids have to be trained through science and philosophy. There's a lot of ways to train one's reason. Board games, language itself trains you in the ways of reason. I also want to be clear that Rousseau thinks science and philosophy are things good in themselves. In the hands of the right people, a small group of elite wise men, people like Socrates, Rousseau thinks that the results are both beautiful and spectacular. But the issue is, most of us are not Socrates. That's why you can't build a society grounded on reason. Here's the calculus. All of us, if we're in the state of nature, can be naturally good. Why? Because human nature for Rousseau is good. All of us can live in Sparta and have the potential, have the capacity to be a virtuous citizen, because our ability to imitate heroes is very strong. But in Enlightenment society, there will only be a few, if there are any at all, Socrates. Most of the people are going to fall prey to contrarianism, they're going to fall prey to partial truths, they're going to fall prey to paralyzing skepticism. And if I still haven't hammered home just how impotent the faculty of reason is, I will just remind you that what makes these wise men, Socrates, what makes the wise men wise, their constitutive quality, is that they recognize the limitations of their reason, that they recognize their own ignorance. I quote you Rousseau. Only in a very few men of genius does insight into their own ignorance grow as they learn, and they are the only ones for whom study may be good. Almost as soon as small minds have learned something, they believe they know everything, and there's no sort of foolishness which this conviction will not make them say or do. And so, the real target of Rousseau's critique of enlightenment is popular enlightenment. It's spreading knowledge too far, which is interesting because we tend to think of Rousseau as an egalitarian thinker, right? As a democratic egalitarian thinker. But I'll remind you that Rousseau's arguments against popular enlightenment does proceed through the egalitarian democratic tradition. Rousseau isn't Nietzsche in his Untimely Meditations, attacking enlightenment because he wants to create a culture for the elite, right, to produce these higher men. Rousseau attacks popular enlightenment precisely because it's incompatible with the common man. Rousseau also isn't Plato, who attacked the intellectuals of his day, who tried to use a system of noble lies to build an aristocracy. Rousseau's concern with popular enlightenment is that the rationalization of society is precisely what destroys the possibility of democratic will formation. Democratic will formation can only happen in genuine communities where you identify with the other person, where you have shared identities, identities which science and rational inquiry threatens. And so, his critique of science is precisely that it's incompatible with democratic will formation. But that's just wrong, right? What about modern democracies that also push science? I think Rousseau would say, we're not truly democratic. And you can see that by the metaphor, by the way we conceive of how democracy works. We think about it as negotiation. I come to the table ready to argue for my side, what I want. You come to the table with your side. And then we compromise, we meet in the middle. For Rousseau, true democratic will formation is about each citizen arguing for what he or she thinks is best for the entire community. So the process is not one of tug of war, it's not one of negotiation, but it's one of information. Different citizens will have different vantage points and different ideas about what is good, but again, for the whole community. But to be able to argue for the whole community, you need to identify with the whole community. And that identification is precisely what rational inquiry threatens. This is why I think Rousseau's critique of enlightenment is so valuable for us, because he's speaking to us and he shows us how science threatens the democratic values and institutions that matter to us. And I think this also helps us understand why he's so critical of things like the printing press. Because it lowers the barrier to be an intellectual, it pushes enlightenment on people who can't handle it, and it immortalizes bad authors. For Rousseau, popular media is bad media. Think about the average book before the printing press. Think about the average book after the printing press. Think about your average self-published book. Think about your average YouTube video. And think about your average tweet. The more democratized a medium is, the worse it's going to get.